If the ascent stage failed to light, were you prepared to leave the moon alone if Cernan had to go to the surface to perform the jumper cable procedure? Well, the jumper cable procedure would only work if he came back in the spacecraft with the jumper cable, because the idea is to attach that one end of the jumper cable to batteries. The idea was to attach one end of the jumper cable, two ends, to batteries in the descent stage, and then bring the other ends up to the into the cabin, push the door as closed as you could, and attach those the other two leads to circuit breakers, specific circuit breakers. And as soon as they were attached, the valves that allowed the hypergolic fuels to go into the combustion chamber of the ascent engine would open, and we would be on our way. So it's really a hypothetical that almost never would have happened. If the jumper cable procedure hadn't worked, we'd both stay on the moon. Okay? You must have anticipated that walking on the moon would change your life. How did the reality of those changes compare with whatever your expectations may have been before leaving for the moon? I'm not sure anybody really thought very much, maybe, at least not the people I was closely involved with, about how your life would be changed by having gone to the moon. That was something that you really started to think about after the fact, and when you no longer had an opportunity to maybe fly again, or when you were faced with the tours that every crew undertook both nationally and internationally. And then you started to get a feeling for what it meant to other people. The fact that somebody had gone to the moon, and you in particular were representing those people in the 450,000 Americans that made it all possible. So I certainly didn't spend any time debating with myself or anybody else what life would be like after having flown to the moon. And in fact, it didn't change an awful lot. There was a lot more public activity, but we had already gotten used to that because of what was called a week in the barrel, and that was anyone not assigned to a crew was on call, usually about once or twice a year, to NASA headquarters to go out for a week of public relations activities. And so everybody had been exposed to the public life by the time they ever flew on a mission, and the mission activities, post-mission activities, were just more of that in slightly more intense way, particularly for Apollo 17. The last flight to the moon, which Apollo 17 was, had the most extensive post-flight activity. We spent the better part of 6 months touring the United States, and it was 5 days a week kind of activity, and then we took about 2 months worth of foreign travel, particularly a month-long trip around the equatorial countries of the world, and all of that not only was a significant amount of work, but it was extremely interesting activity to see not only how people throughout the world responded to the Apollo program, but to just see how people throughout the world lived and what the promise of Apollo might be for these people.